was in my home office, the glow of my computer screen illuminating my face as I navigated the virtual landscape of my job as a marketing executive. The rhythmic tapping of my keyboard was interrupted by a sudden, insistent pounding on the front door. Confused, I rose from my desk and made my way towards the entrance. I peered through the peephole, my heart skipping a beat as I saw two uniformed police officers standing on my doorstep. Their expressions were stern, their eyes cold and unwavering. A wave of panic washed over me. I had never been in trouble with the law before, never even received a parking ticket. What could they possibly want with me? With trembling hands, I opened the door, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can I help you? Are you Mrs. Ava Thompson?" The taller officer asked, his voice gruff and authoritative. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "Miss, we have a warrant for your arrest," he said, his words piercing the silence like a gunshot. My knees buckled, and I stumbled back against the wall, my vision blurring. "Rest? For what?" I managed to choke out. The officer's eyes scanned the room, his gaze lingering on the framed family photos and the children's artwork adorning the refrigerator. "Embezzlement, fraud, identity theft, money laundering," he said, ticking off the charges like a grocery list. A cold dread settled over me. "There must be some mistake," I pleaded, my voice shaking. "I've never done anything like that." The officer's expression remained unchanged. "Please step outside, miss. We need to take you into custody." "No, wait," I cried, my voice rising in panic. "You have to let me call my husband. He's a lawyer, he can explain everything." But the officers weren't interested in my explanations. They moved forward, their movements swift and practiced. One of them grabbed my arm, twisting it behind my back with a force that sent a jolt of pain through my shoulder. I cried out instinctively, trying to pull away, but it was no use. "Stop resisting," the officer barked, tightening his grip on my arm. The handcuffs clicked shut, their cold metal biting into my wrists. The other officer stepped forward, his face a mask of indifference. "You're making this harder than it needs to be, miss," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Just cooperate, and maybe we won't add resisting arrest to your charges." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, a mixture of fear, anger, and humiliation. I was being treated like a common criminal, a dangerous threat to society. The reality of the situation was sinking in, and it was terrifying. They led me out of the house, past my shocked neighbors, and into the back of the squad car. As we drove away, I glanced back at my home, a place that had always felt safe and secure, now tainted by the shadow of suspicion and accusation. At the police station, I was fingerprinted, photographed, and placed in a holding cell. The hours dragged on, each tick of the clock amplifying my anxiety. I had no idea what was happening, no way to contact my husband, no way to defend myself. Eventually, I was led to an interrogation room where a detective waited for me. He laid out the evidence against me, a stack of documents that supposedly proved my guilt. Bank statements with suspicious transactions, emails with incriminating details, and forged signatures that bore an eerie resemblance to my own. I tried to explain, to plead my innocence, but the detective remained unconvinced. He grilled me relentlessly, his questions growing more pointed, his tone more accusatory. I felt myself unraveling, the stress and fear overwhelming my senses. "Listen," the detective said, leaning forward, his eyes boring into mine. "We have evidence that you forged documents, embezzled funds, and used stolen identities to launder money. You're facing serious charges, Ms. Thompson. Do yourself a favor and cooperate." I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. "I didn't do it," I said. "I swear I'm being framed." The detective scoffed. "That's what they all say," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But the evidence doesn't lie." He then explained that the officers also noted my resistance back at the house, which is a separate charge. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I was trapped in a nightmare, and there seemed to be no way out. As the detective continued her interrogation, my mind raced. I knew I was innocent, but the evidence they presented seemed so convincing. My heart pounded in my chest, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. I felt trapped, helpless, and alone. "Mrs. Thompson, do you have anything to say for yourself?" the detective asked, her voice dripping with disdain. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. How could I defend myself against accusations I didn't even understand? The weight of the situation pressed down on me, suffocating me with its relentless pressure. Suddenly, the door to the interrogation room swung open, revealing a figure I hadn't expected to see. It was my husband, Mark, his face pale but determined. "Ava," he exclaimed, rushing to my side. "Are you all right?" I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. His presence was a beacon of hope in the darkness that had enveloped me. "Officer," Mark said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm an attorney, and I'm representing my wife. I demand to see the evidence against her." The detective hesitated, clearly taken aback by Mark's sudden appearance. She glanced at her partner, then back at Mark. "Very well," she said, her voice laced with reluctance. "But don't think this changes anything. Your wife is in serious trouble." Mark didn't flinch. "I'm confident we can resolve this misunderstanding," he said, his eyes locked on mine, a silent promise of unwavering support. The detective led us to another room, where she presented the evidence against me, bank statements showing large sums of money being transferred to offshore accounts, emails discussing shady business deals, and even a forged document bearing my signature. Mark examined the evidence carefully, his brow furrowed in concentration. As he read through the documents, a glimmer of hope flickered in his eyes. "Detective," he said, his voice steady and confident, "I believe there's been a mistake. My wife is not capable of these crimes. I'm confident that further investigation will reveal the truth." The detective scoffed. "Your confidence is misplaced, Mr. Thompson," she said. "The evidence is clear. Your wife is guilty." Mark remained unfazed. "With all due respect, detective," he said, "I believe you're jumping to conclusions. I'm requesting that my wife be released on bail immediately. In the meantime, I'll be conducting my own investigation into this matter." The detective hesitated, but ultimately agreed to Mark's request. I was released on bail, but the charges against me still hung over my head like a dark cloud. As we left the police station, Mark squeezed my hand, his touch reassuring me that we would get through this together. We returned home, exhausted but determined to clear my name. Mark immediately got to work, hiring a team of forensic accountants, private investigators, and cybersecurity experts. They meticulously combed through the evidence, searching for any clues that could lead them to the real culprit. One name kept popping up, Karen, a relatively new employee who had joined the company a few months earlier. Karen was an enigma, a quiet, unassuming woman who always kept to herself. She rarely interacted with her colleagues, preferring to work in isolation, her office door always firmly shut. She had a certain intensity to her, a nervous energy that seemed to vibrate just beneath the surface. Sarah, the seasoned investigator hired by Mark, decided to delve deeper into Karen's background. She started by discreetly interviewing other employees, gathering tidbits of information about Karen's behavior and habits. Some described her as odd or standoffish, while others simply said she was a hard worker who kept to herself. As Sarah dug further, she discovered that Karen had a history of financial troubles. A recent bankruptcy had left her with a mountain of debt, and rumors swirled about unpaid bills and mounting collection notices. Sarah also learned that Karen had been a top contender for the promotion I had received, a fact that had clearly fueled her resentment towards me. Sarah's intuition told her that Karen was hiding something, so she began observing her more closely. She noticed that Karen would often stay late at the office, long after everyone else had gone home. The lights in her office would burn well into the night, casting an eerie glow on the otherwise deserted floor. One evening, as Sarah was preparing to leave, she decided to take a detour past Karen's office. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear the faint sound of typing. Curiosity piqued, Sarah cautiously pushed the door open and peered inside. What she saw made her blood run cold. Karen was hunched over her computer, her face illuminated by the screen. She was meticulously recreating company letterhead, her fingers flying across the keyboard with a practiced ease. Next to the computer, a stack of bank statements lay open, the numbers on them suspiciously altered. Sarah quickly snapped a few photos with her phone, her heart pounding in her chest. She had caught Karen red-handed in the act of forging documents and falsifying financial records. It was the breakthrough they had been waiting for, the missing piece of the puzzle that would finally exonerate Aver. The next morning, Sarah presented her findings to Mark. He was both shocked and elated. He immediately contacted the authorities, who obtained a warrant to search Karen's office and home. The search turned up a treasure trove of evidence, including forged documents, altered bank statements, and a series of emails detailing Karen's elaborate scheme to frame Aver for her own financial crimes. Karen was arrested and charged with multiple felonies, her once quiet life unraveling in a spectacular fashion. The nightmare was finally over.